Mark Ogden's still with us, so Arsenal, 7 points clear. They could, of course, have been 9. Aston Villa can close that gap. They're in action on Sunday. But overall, as I say, we've seen this before from Arsenal. Too much of late.
Yeah, and it was a great opportunity, bearing in mind they knew what had gone on in the morning, to go to a side that were beaten by Everton recently, amongst others. You know, the Forest, apart from the West Ham game, they've not been in good form. They've been under pressure at home. And of course Arsenal dominated, they were always going to do that. But Forest made it into the type of game that they wanted. You know, it was a bit scrappy and they tried to hit on the counter and there was a few tackles going in. But Arsenal were, just poor in the final third. They just looked a little flat, as almost they thought a point was okay for them.
Do you think so?
No, but I kind of just felt that. And obviously, I think there is a... depending what happens tomorrow with Aston Villa, they can put a bit of pressure on, or a little bit of pressure on. Once again, we saw a talking point up front in Victor Gyökeres. He does look, and when we come in today, before we came on the show, I said to you boys, he looks like a championship player in a potential title-winning side. That's how he looks.
Do you know, this is not a straightforward, Arsenal this and Arsenal that. Listen, you know how good the Invincibles were? That was a fantastic team, wasn't it?
Right.
Right.
Where are you going with this?
Well, they drew 12 games. They drew 12 games.
I think it's the performances.
It's the front players. It's the front players.
Well, yes.
And against Liverpool and today against Forest, the front players were lacking, and he completely changed the front three again, as he did at Liverpool, and they still couldn't produce.
Right.
So that's the only problem they have.
So what's that got to do with the Invincibles?
Well, because everybody's going, they've dropped points. I mean, you can't expect every single time you step on the field you're going to win 3 or 4-0 against a team like Forest.
This isn't an anomaly. This is Arsenal now. Like, who's excited about watching an Arsenal game? No one.
The point is, Dan, they've put themselves in a position where we're sitting here, I'm sitting here going, is this a point gained or 2 lost? They're 7 points clear at the top of the league. If somebody said to you, after 22 games, you're an Arsenal manager, by the way, you're going to be 7 points clear after 22 games, you would have taken their hand off in a heartbeat.
I absolutely understand that.
Well, I just think we get carried away. We get carried away with this, woe is me. They're 7 points clear at the top of the league after 22 games.
Right.
And if we want to pick a hole, we can pick a hole on the front players in the last 2 Premier League games who have been firing blanks.
No, they're going to be champions. I don't think there are many that are going to argue against you for that. And yes, that's brilliant. Right. But for us, we want something more, don't we? Like, if you're not an Arsenal fan,
that's what I'm saying. We just look at the team sheet and we look at what we think Arsenal are, and when they're at their best, and then we look at Forest, what they are at their best. Well, they should be an easy win. Football doesn't work that way. You know, sometimes when you're playing away from home against a side like Forest, who on their day will chase you, fight you, harry you, not give you much. And if you don't take those little opportunities you get...
Thinking, we could have been 9 points, and it could be 4 points by the end of the
season.
I think he likes draws, because Liverpool are drawn again. He likes...
Draws are the new wins.
Draws are good.
Yeah. What about the Invincibles, Mark?
Yeah.
They drew 12.
Well, they drew 12 games.
I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Well, it has a lot to do with it.
Why?
Well, because everybody talks about how fantastic a team it was, but they drew 12 games.
Right.
But this Arsenal team is not allowed to draw. It's all of a sudden, it's all woe. It's woe is me. This is Arsenal. Arsenal's going to... calm down.
Oggy, is Arsenal going to do anything in January?
Unlikely. They spent a lot of money in the summer, didn't they? They really kind of blew their budget on Gyökeres and quite a lot of forwards. Eze came in and Madueke, so it's unlikely they'll bring anybody in. But I know where Stevie's coming from. I can take his point, but I think in terms of the draws, but I think that Invincible side would, when they had to win, they would win, and they would show people how good they were. And I think this Arsenal side, they just lack that ruthlessness to kind of really take a step towards the title. And I think a lot of it's down to Arteta in the sense that he never really goes for broke. He's more cautious than the managers that usually win titles. And I think they will win the league, but I mean, this is probably going to upset a lot of Arsenal fans. But if they win the league this year, I think they'll be the weakest champions for a long time, because they've got the weakest teams chasing them. You know, the teams that are in second and third aren't the classic, challengers. This Arsenal side are nowhere near the Liverpool sides that have won it, the City sides. I mean, even the Leicester side that won it in 2016, I think they give it this Arsenal side a run for the money. So But they're going to win it, so the Arsenal fans won't care, will they? They won't care if they're not champagne football like the Invincibles. If they win the title, it doesn't matter. But they're winning it because they're so far clear because of the failings of others rather than because of their excellent play or performances themselves.
So 12 times the Invincibles.
Oh my God, he's still going on about it.
They didn't have to win. All right.
Right. Anything else? I think that's it for that game. Questions then for Arne Slot to answer. Liverpool 1, Burnley 1. Liverpool are 4th, despite all their rubbish this season. Yeah. They are 1 point clear of Manchester United. Big gap between them and obviously Aston Villa and City.
Look at that goal difference, +4 after 22 games.
It's a bit like City in a sense, isn't it? There shouldn't be any excuses. It's just not good enough.
But it's just weird.
No, but it's just not. It's not acceptable. It's not good enough. He had everything he wanted pretty much. All right, didn't get Mark Gay in the summer, right? But he didn't. Nobody thought that Konate and Van Dijk in particular would have poor seasons and Kerkez would struggle. But he's got to address that, the manager. But he got pretty much everything else. I mean, they were just going to turn up, and everybody else was going to get on their hands and knees and give them the Premier League trophy. So to see some of their performances this year, it's embarrassing. And I saw a stat earlier, it's the first time in Premier League history a reigning Premier League champion has failed to beat a promoted side at home. And that they've drawn with Leeds, they've drawn with Burnley, they've drawn with Sunderland. There's nobody that turns up at Anfield and doesn't think they can win. And that's on the manager and the players. It's not good enough.
Like when Edwards scores, you think, right, everyone's going to rally now. And I suppose we thought that all season. And there's just no response. We've talked about, that glass chin that Liverpool have.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, defensively, if you're playing against Liverpool, they're going to give you a chance. I mean, you just know. And regardless of how long you defend, like Burnley did today, when you know in the back of your mind that we can get at these, and we just need to get it right once, and that's pretty much what they did. They got it right probably twice in the game, and they took one of the chances, and then Liverpool have been doing going forward what they've been doing all season. There's no real combination play. There was a couple of times over the last 2 or 3 weeks when Frimpong's been playing that him and Verts have had a couple
of. What are Liverpool
doing
in training up front to address this? Because as you say, we see it all the time.
I would guarantee you in training they're hitting the back of the net for fun. The problem is training and games are two different animals. You can set up in training. Ideally what you want is repetitiveness, right? And that means you're setting training up. You're doing exercises so that your forwards and your attacking players are hitting the back of the net. So that when they go into the game, they're confident. But of course, unfortunately, when you go into the game, the opposition stick people in front of you, and the opposition do things that they're not supposed to do, and so it completely changes the whole thing. But the biggest worry for me is there's no combinations with the forward players really.
Yep.
It's all individual stuff, and when it's all individual stuff, then the percentages just go down in terms of creating chances and scoring goals. And then when you can't defend, then it just needs one break, and all of a sudden you drop 2 points.
It's not even a big story anymore, is it?
No.
That's the whole thing. You look at the order that we were looking at today, it's like, what are we going to say is different about Liverpool?
But it should be. It should be, and maybe that's... Had Liverpool not won the Premier League last year, and they did, had they not, they would have been dragging, I think the Liverpool fans, that is, would have been dragging this manager through the coals. The fact that he came in and they did play so well, particularly for the first 6 months or 7 months of the season domestically, and took the Premier League by the scruff of the neck. Okay, they fell away at the end, but they'd already won it. The fact that he did that is allowing him, at the moment, this leeway for all these performances. And he can thank his lucky stars he got that, because had he not, and they had been just also-rans last year, he'd have been back in Holland by now, looking at some of these results. So we talked about it the other day, Stevie and I. Barring a disaster, he's going to get to the end of the season. Yeah. But if this is a continuation next year, he hasn't got a snowball's chance of staying in that job. Not a chance.
Yeah. No, there's no sign of improvement. I think that's the thing, isn't it? There's no sign that what he's doing...
Well, he's got the Salah issue.
Yes.
Which, and again, next year, 1 year older. Van Dijk starting to struggle, 1 year older. So it doesn't get any easier when you get into your 30s like that. and you start to struggle. It's much more difficult to have a bad season and when you're 33, 34 and flick a switch and come back in the summer and have a great season.
Yeah.
It's much easier to do that when you're 26, 27, 28. So if he can't address it, the chances of the form of some of these players getting better next year is very slim.
Yeah, Oggy, the drop-off has been so stark, and it's a question that none of us thought we were going to be having at the start of the season, is questioning Slot's future, especially with a certain former Liverpool player who's just left his job at Real Madrid.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, the backing for Slot amongst the fans, it's beginning to wear a bit thin, to be honest. I think, having been at games and spoke to, some Liverpool fans that I know, they are losing patience with Slot, and it's almost like they don't want to, but they are doing, because they accept that, he won the league last season and he had a great year, first year after Klopp, but I think they accept now that it's not looking great. And you're right, Xabi Alonso's available, and Xabi Alonso is kind of the darling of the Liverpool fans. He was their first choice to replace Jurgen Klopp, and none of them had actually heard of Arne Slot, to be honest, when he got the job, but they all wanted Alonso, but he ruled himself out pretty quickly. So the fact that he's there, obviously he want a break and he want to kind of freshen up, but when the summer comes, I'd imagine he'll be available. So that doesn't work well for Arne Slot. So he has to get something out of this season. He has to start finding a way to deal with those issues that Craig addressed. And I think the big one, the Mo Salah thing won't be an issue next season. It'll have to be resolved either now, in the next 2 weeks, or in the summer. I don't see Mo Salah being at Liverpool next season. I really don't. He may not even be here for the rest of the season. I think he will be, but that hasn't been resolved, that situation. He comes back from the African Nations on, I think, Monday or Tuesday. And, what does Arne Slot do? They haven't lost a game since he dropped him, but obviously they haven't been beating teams and turning up any trees, but they haven't lost. Now, when they put Mo Salah back in the team, the issues that they dropped him for in the first place, the lack of work rate, the lack of goals, if that remains the case, and it affects Florian Wirtz's kind of slow progress, then Mo Salah's a problem again. So Arne Slot's got a massive issue to address this when Mo Salah comes back, and it's kind of been brushed under the carpet a little bit. And I guess it's something that he's kind of dreading, because the Mo Salah situation, it was a hard one to solve last time, so that could blow up in the next few days. And we'll be talking about Salah's future at Liverpool, of course, later on in the week when he returns from the African Cup of Nations.
I think we're talked at halftime that Arsenal do such a good job of putting pressure on you with set pieces. They kind of wear you down. They create chances, and eventually you break. I think Mikel Arteta would be disappointed with his substitutions. I mean, he brought on nearly all his best players, impact players from the bench, at a moment in the game where you think, okay, now he's going to turn, because we're going to turn the screw, keep giving them more pressure. And I'll be honest, none of his substitutes made any real impact. And these aren't a lot of these are starting players as well. So there'd be a disappointment there.
Rob? The overriding factor will be frustration, because this was a chance to put a serious gap between them and the rest. It could have been a big day this for Arsenal. Listen, they didn't lose the game, but last season they drew 14 games. That stopped them winning the title. And people like Victor Gyökeres and Eze were bought this season to turn those draws into wins. And today that didn't happen. For all that possession, for all that they played, they had 3 shots on target. That can't quite be good enough, and it's going to be a disappointment. But I have to say, credit to Sean Dyche. It was a draw by Dyche. He set his team up. They were structurally difficult to play against. Defending was good, like we saw under Nuno. And listen, they take the point in their fight at the bottom end of the table.
Tim, do you think we're getting to the point where Mikel Arteta is going to not start Victor Gyökeres?
It's a big call. I say no, only because I've mentioned before, he was a striker that they've been desperate to get. They went out and spent the money and they got him. So he has to manage the situation really well. It's not. I think he can drop him. I do. I think he has enough games and enough players where he can manage the situation. But he can't, as you said, you can't hook him at halftime. You can't embarrass him, because you still need to get the best out of him.
Mikel has to do the right thing to win the title. And if that means Gyökeres doesn't start and comes on the bench and whatever, just make sure that at the end of the season, he feels comfortable in himself that he's made the right decision for this football club.
Mikel Arteta's work at Arsenal is being viewed in an even brighter light after the recent coaching shakeups elsewhere. With Chelsea parting ways with Enzo Maresca and Manchester United moving on from Ruben Amorim, the contrast is hard to miss. Arsenal has kept moving forward under Arteta, giving him time through difficult stretches, and now seeing the payoff as the club pushes again in the Premier League title race. It also raises a bigger question about strategy. While Chelsea and United are changing direction again, Arteta has been in place for more than 6 years, outlasting a long list of managers across those 2 clubs in that span. That stability has become part of the story, and it was a major talking point on the Seeing Red podcast with Tom Canton and John Cross. Beyond reacting to Amorim's dismissal and breaking down wins over Aston Villa and Bournemouth, plus Manchester City's loss to Chelsea, the conversation kept returning to one core idea: structure. Not just who is the coach, but how much power that coach has, and whether the club is built to support a long-term project. Cross pointed to Arsenal as a rare example of patience turning into real strength. He argued that Arsenal's willingness to back Arteta through the messy early phases helped create the stable position they're in now, and that this kind of time and support investment is what can turn a club into something truly solid. Canton's response was sharp and honest. Arteta's arc, he said, has almost become a problem for other clubs, because it tempts them to keep coaches they probably shouldn't. But at the same time, it's still the best example of what can happen when you hire the right person and actually give them time. And that time wasn't smooth. The discussion highlighted how Arsenal could easily have pulled the plug early. 2 8th-place finishes, then 5th, missing out on the Champions League, and a Europa League semi-final exit to Unai Emery's Villarreal. Any of those moments could have pushed a club into panic mode. Instead, the argument is that Arsenal recognized the bigger reality. Arteta didn't have the resources to compete at the required level right away. The squad needed a rebuild. The roster needed to be refreshed. That's where the comparison to Chelsea and United becomes even more pointed. The podcast suggested that recruitment and decision-making structure are often what determine whether a coach survives. If signings don't land, results suffer. And if a coach doesn't have enough influence, or the club isn't aligned behind a clear plan, it becomes much easier for things to collapse. In other words, giving time only works if the coach is empowered to shape the team in a way that matches the vision. Cross also emphasized that Arteta's situation stood out because he pushed to be a true manager, not just a head coach. The idea is simple. Top coaches want a real say in the build, and they want the club to match what they were promised when they took the job. The discussion even pointed to how Arteta survived a low moment, like the home loss to Burnley, because the club stayed behind him. And in that period, with fan pressure affected by the COVID-era environment, Arsenal were able to hold their nerve instead of reacting emotionally. Meanwhile, the big unknowns now shift back to Chelsea and Manchester United. Who replaces Amorim? And how will the next chapter look at Chelsea? The answers may come sooner than people expect. But for Arsenal, the reality stays the same. They're stable, they're moving forward, and they're still in the title chase, while others are starting over again. And that contrast can shape how people judge every manager in the league. Because when two massive clubs hit the reset button again, it forces the same question Cross raised on the show. Is the quick switch actually fixing the problem, or just delaying the real work? The bigger takeaway from the discussion is that time isn't a magic solution by itself. It only becomes valuable when the club's structure supports the plan. And when the coach has the influence to push the squad in the direction he believes it needs to go. That's why the distinction between head coach and manager kept coming up. The podcast point is that if a coach is expected to own the results, he usually wants a meaningful say in the decisions that shape those results. And if he doesn't get that, patience alone won't save him. That's also where Arteta's early struggles get reframed. Those finishes and setbacks could have become a reason to panic. Instead, they became evidence of why alignment matters, because Arsenal chose to treat them as part of a build, not a final verdict. And once the squad was reshaped the way the club believed it needed to be, the results started to reflect that long-term approach. So the repercussions aren't just about Arsenal looking stable, it's about how stability changes your margin for error. When you don't reset every year, you're not constantly starting from zero. You're building on decisions, learning from setbacks, and keeping a clearer identity. For Chelsea and Manchester United, the immediate consequence is obvious. They're changing direction again, which means the next appointment carries even more weight. Because every new coach isn't just judged on results. He's judged on whether the club is finally giving him the structure and authority that the role demands. That's why the question at the end matters so much. Who will replace Amorim? And how will Liam Rosenior do at Chelsea? Because those answers will test the exact theme the show kept returning to. Time, support, structure, and control. And for Arsenal, it's a different kind of pressure. Stability doesn't guarantee trophies, but it does keep you in the fight longer. And right now, while others restart, Arsenal get to stay focused on what they're already doing, chasing the Premier League title.